Ma'am, can you provide identification? What's your status here?
I'm a licensed attorney. My ID is in my vehicle. What's the legal basis for this stop?
Are you refusing to comply with a federal check?
I'm complying, but you have no reason to
detention is
suspend me.
Have you ever considered how a single fleeting moment can completely shatter your reality, testing every ounce of your training, your patience, and your dignity? We like to believe that if we play by the rules, work hard, and build a respectable life, we are shielded from baseless assumptions and sudden injustice. But sometimes, bias doesn't care about your credentials. Sometimes a prejudiced mindset looks right past your achievements and sees only a target. Today, we are diving into an unbelievable true story about a brilliant legal mind who was severely underestimated by people in power and how she turned a terrifying family outing into a masterclass in accountability. Before we get into it, if you have ever been misjudged based purely on someone else's preconceived notions, let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where everyday heroes systematically dismantle corruption, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stick around until the very end. You are not going to want to miss how this unfolds. It was a perfectly ordinary weekend morning, the kind of crisp, bright day where the sunshine makes everything feel vibrant and alive. The local grocery store parking lot in a quiet Midwestern suburb was packed with people running their weekly errands. Valerie Benton had just finished picking up ingredients for a family dinner. Dressed comfortably in her weekend athletic wear, she was simply a mom trying to navigate a busy schedule. Her 7-year-old son, Marcus, was chatting eagerly about his favorite video games, while her 5-year-old daughter, Chloe, was already munching on a snack from one of the grocery bags. It was a picture of suburban normalcy, right up until 3 federal agents stepped out of an unmarked utility vehicle. Valerie noticed them immediately. As an attorney with over a decade and a half of grueling courtroom experience, her entire career was built on reading human behavior. She had spent years analyzing hostile witnesses, deciphering the subtle shifts in a judge's posture, and anticipating aggressive tactics. So when she saw these 3 men fanning out in a wide tactical approach, their hands resting entirely too close to their duty belts, her instincts flared. They wore tactical vests bearing the insignia of federal immigration enforcement, and their eyes were locked dead onto her. They walked with the heavy, predetermined stride of men who had already made up their minds. Marcus stopped talking mid-sentence. The innocent joy drained from his face, replaced by the profound, instinctual confusion of a child sensing sudden danger. Little Chloe instinctively hid behind her mother's leg. Valerie took a deep, steadying breath. She deliberately slowed her movements, keeping her hands entirely visible as she placed the last bag into the trunk. 15 years of battling prosecutors had taught her one vital lesson. When dealing with armed authority figures, sudden movements are your worst enemy. The lead agent, a man named Davis, closed the distance. When he spoke, his voice was entirely devoid of emotion, a flat, rehearsed bark of bureaucratic authority. He announced that they were conducting compliance checks in the area and demanded to see her identification and proof of lawful presence. There was no polite inquiry. There was no conversational buffer. It was a command rooted entirely in a baseless assumption. Valerie stood tall, keeping her hands perfectly still. She maintained steady eye contact, projecting the calm, authoritative presence she used to command courtrooms. She informed Agent Davis in a clear and measured tone that she was a licensed, practicing attorney. She explained exactly where her driver's license and her state bar card were located, inside her purse, sitting on the passenger seat of her car, just a few feet away. She slowly pointed toward the open door, offering to retrieve them so they could clear up this misjudgment immediately. Agent Davis physically blocked her path. His expression hardened into a wall of absolute disbelief. He demanded to know if she had any proof on her person right at that exact second. The underlying message was painfully clear. He did not believe a single word coming out of her mouth. He looked at a successful, highly educated mother in her weekend clothes and saw only a stereotype. A familiar, burning heat began to rise in Valerie's chest, but she ruthlessly suppressed it. She could not afford the luxury of anger, not with her children watching, not with armed men surrounding her. She reiterated her identity, maintaining her professional composure. She offered them her bar license number, inviting them to call the state registry to verify her credentials on the spot. Instead of listening, the situation escalated. Another agent flanked the passenger side of her vehicle, peering through the glass as if hunting for contraband. The third agent moved to block the shopping cart, effectively trapping her between the car and their bodies. Valerie tried one more time, moving incredibly slowly toward the open door to grab her wallet. Agent Davis immediately snapped his hand to his belt and ordered her to step away from the vehicle. The command echoed across the asphalt. Take a second to put yourself in Valerie's shoes. You are surrounded. Your children are terrified. And the very people sworn to uphold the law are blatantly ignoring the legal protocols you have dedicated your life to defending. How would you keep your cool? Let me know what you would do in the comments below. Around them, the bustling parking lot ground to a halt. Shoppers stopped in their tracks. Cell phones emerged from pockets as bystanders realized something terribly wrong was unfolding. Valerie took a slow step back, raising her hands to shoulder height. She announced loudly, projecting her voice for the surrounding cameras, that she was complying. She stated her full name, her profession, and the fact that she was unarmed. Crucially, she declared that there was absolutely no reasonable suspicion for this detention. The moment she stepped away from the door, Davis lunged. He grabbed her wrist, violently wrenching her arm behind her back. The second agent rushed in, and cold, heavy metal clamped down around her wrists. The handcuffs clicked shut. Marcus let out a high-pitched, terrified scream. Chloe burst into hysterical tears, dropping her snack onto the concrete. Even as her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, Valerie kept her voice level. She looked directly at her crying children, promising them everything would be all right, begging them to stay exactly where they were. Then she turned her attention to the agents. She systematically listed every legal boundary they were crossing. She cited her constitutional protections against unlawful search and seizure. She explicitly stated that they lacked probable cause or any articulable suspicion. They ignored every word. They marched her toward the unmarked vehicle. A brave store employee ran out to comfort the hysterical children, shielding them from the sight of their mother being forced into the back of a federal SUV. As the door slammed shut, Valerie was left sitting in the dim interior, her shoulders aching from the cuffs, watching her children cry through tinted glass as the vehicle pulled away. But as the SUV navigated through city traffic, something incredible happened. The panic began to recede, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. Valerie's legal mind engaged like a supercomputer. She began mentally logging every single detail, the exact timestamp of the arrest, the badge numbers on their vests, the lack of Miranda warnings, the refusal to verify her identity. Then the agents in the front seat made a catastrophic mistake. Believing their suspect was exactly who they assumed her to be, someone vulnerable, uneducated, and powerless, they began to chat casually. Agent Davis remarked to his partner that this arrest made 3 for the week in this specific zone, noting that it would put them perfectly over their monthly quota. His partner chuckled, casually mentioning how pushing enforcement in specific diverse neighborhoods was the easiest way to pad their performance numbers. Sitting silently in the back seat, Valerie committed every single syllable to memory. They were openly admitting to a systemic quota system. They were confessing to targeting specific demographics based on superficial traits just to hit bureaucratic targets. They thought they were talking in front of a helpless victim. They had no idea they had just handed a master litigator the exact weapon she needed to destroy their entire operation. Valerie was transported to a bleak, concrete processing facility. For hours, she was locked in a sterile holding room. The entire time, she was treated with chilling indifference. When they finally processed her fingerprints and ran her information, they were met with a startling reality. The system didn't show a vulnerable target. It displayed the impeccable record of a high-profile, deeply respected state attorney. The atmosphere in the facility shifted instantly. Agents nervously shuffled paperwork. Supervisors were quietly called into hallways. They suddenly realized they had made a colossal, career-ending error. After nearly 4 agonizing hours of being separated from her children, the heavy metal door swung open. An agent awkwardly informed her that her identity had been verified and she was free to leave. There was no apology. There was no admission of guilt. Just a sterile, bureaucratic dismissal. Valerie stood up, calmly smoothing out her wrinkled clothing. She looked the supervising agent dead in the eye and verbally filed an immediate demand for all body camera footage, incident reports, and personnel files related to her detention. The sheer terror in the supervisor's eyes told her everything she needed to know. They knew they were in trouble. When Valerie finally made it home, the tough, professional exterior melted away. The moment she walked through the door, Marcus and Chloe sprinted into her arms. She collapsed to the floor, holding her children tight, finally allowing the tears of fear and relief to fall. Her own mother, a fierce woman who had lived through decades of social struggles, stood watching, her jaw set in quiet fury. When the kids were finally asleep, her mother asked her what she was going to do. Valerie's tears had dried. Her voice was pure steel. "I am going to take their entire system apart." Over the next few days, Valerie didn't just plan a lawsuit, she engineered a legal demolition. She partnered with a legendary civil rights attorney known for taking down corrupt institutions. When she sat in his office and recounted the conversation she had overheard in the SUV, the casual admission of a quota system targeting specific neighborhoods, her attorney just smiled. The agents hadn't just violated her rights, they had handed her the master key to expose a massive systemic abuse of power. They filed a massive federal lawsuit naming the agency, the department, and the specific agents involved. The charges were devastating: unlawful detention, severe violations of constitutional rights, profiling based on assumptions, and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. The government's response was predictable. They panicked. They immediately offered a massive settlement of tens of thousands of dollars attached to a strict non-disclosure agreement. They wanted her to take the money and vanish quietly. Valerie refused. They doubled the offer, then they tripled it, eventually offering well over $1 million. Valerie rejected every single penny. She made it crystal clear to the media and the courts. This was never about a payout. This was about dragging an invisible, corrupt practice out into the blinding light of a public courtroom. She wanted accountability, and she wanted a permanent precedent that would ensure no other mother would ever be handcuffed in front of her children over a biased assumption. The discovery phase of the trial was a bloodbath for the defense. Because Valerie had locked in her testimony about the quota conversation so early, her legal team was able to subpoena internal communications. They uncovered a treasure trove of damning emails and performance reviews that proved exactly what Valerie had heard. Agents were literally being given bonuses and favorable reviews for targeting specific, diverse neighborhoods, completely ignoring the fundamental requirement of reasonable suspicion. When the trial finally began, the courtroom was packed to the brim with reporters, activists, and legal scholars. The defense tried to paint the incident as a simple good-faith misunderstanding. They put Agent Davis on the stand, where he tried to claim that Valerie's behavior had been suspicious. Valerie's attorney methodically dismantled him. He demanded to know exactly what was suspicious about a mother putting groceries into a car. He projected the synchronized bystander and security footage onto a massive screen for the jury. They watched in crystal clear high definition as a calm, compliant woman was brutally silenced and detained without a shred of legal justification. The defense had absolutely no answer. Then Valerie took the stand. She was magnificent. She didn't yell and she didn't cry. She weaponized her intellect. She clearly articulated her legal background, walked the jury through the terrifying moments of her arrest, and detailed the severe psychological toll it had taken on her young children. And then she dropped the hammer. She recounted the exact word-for-word conversation she had overheard in the SUV. The defense objected, panicking, trying to claim it was uncorroborated hearsay, but the jury had already seen the internal emails. Valerie's testimony tied the entire corrupt system together perfectly. She exposed how the agents had looked at her, made a split-second judgment based purely on their own prejudice, and ignored every constitutional right she possessed. Do you think federal agencies need stricter, independent oversight to prevent quotas from overriding constitutional rights? Sound off in the comments below. Your perspective adds so much value to this community. After days of intense testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated. When they returned, the courtroom held its collective breath. The verdict was a clean sweep. Guilty of unlawful detention, guilty of constitutional violations, guilty of profiling based on bias, guilty of inflicting emotional distress. But the real shockwave came during the damages phase. The jury didn't just want to compensate Valerie, they wanted to punish the institution. They awarded her a staggering multi-million-dollar verdict, an 8-figure sum that sent absolute shockwaves through the federal government. The courtroom erupted into cheers. The agents who had treated her like a criminal sat completely frozen, their careers effectively destroyed in a matter of minutes. Valerie simply nodded, her expression resolute. She had done exactly what she promised her mother she would do. But this story doesn't end with a payout. Valerie took that massive settlement and opened her own powerhouse civil rights law firm. She dedicated her life to defending families who didn't have her legal expertise, representing victims of unlawful stops, biased detentions, and institutional overreach. She hired brilliant young attorneys from marginalized backgrounds, teaching them how to turn their outrage into meticulous, devastating legal strategy. Her children, Marcus and Chloe, eventually grew out of their trauma, watching their mother become a beacon of hope for thousands of people. They learned the most valuable lesson of all, that while power can be abused, it can also be challenged, broken, and rebuilt by those brave enough to stand their ground. Valerie's terrifying morning in a grocery store parking lot ended up changing the landscape of civil rights litigation. She forced federal agencies to overhaul their training, abandon their secret quota systems, and remember that behind every statistic is a human being with unalienable rights. She proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the most dangerous thing a corrupt system can do is underestimate the wrong person. Thank you so much for reading or listening to this incredible journey. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on these powerful true stories. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that standing up for what is right is always worth the fight. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay informed, and never let anyone diminish your worth.